was a pivotal event to meet him because he became a mentor and a valued friend, and helped me reconfigure myself after graduate school. I moved into New York City at that time. And he also put me in touch with the last violin teacher I studied with, the famous Paul Zukovsky, who these pieces were written for. And it was published in a book of 6, and I opened them up, and it was a nice note from John saying, "Here they are, call me if you have any questions." I wrote him a note. We didn't have the internet that day. So I wrote him a note asking if I could call him, and gave him my number. And then one night as I was puzzling over them, the phone rang, and I picked up the phone. He said, "This is John Cage. I've called to answer your questions." He felt that I was serious enough and suggested that if I wanted to, I could come into the city and play for him. I walked into his studio and I said, "I'm very nervous." And these are harder than anything I've ever seen, but I'm very anxious to see, get your input. Then he asked if I would mind if he watched the music while I played. As I started playing, I could barely keep the bow on the string, but the sensation of having him listen to me so carefully calmed me down, and I got through to the end of this first piece, and he looked at me and he said, "I'm not worried. I'll stand by the window and listen to the rest of it." I felt that he was listening to everything, and that was his charm and his charisma. But at the end of it, he said, "I've told Paul Zukovsky about you. Perhaps you'd like to play for him." From that moment on, Cage would show up. Whenever he heard that I was doing a concert, he would just show up, whether his music was being played or not, to lend support and to encourage me. I gave the premiere of 13 Harmonies from Apartment House 1776 at a church in Manhattan. And my friend Sandra Elm was at the door taking the tickets. And I had sent out a special invitation to John saying, "I'm going to premiere the entire work. Please come as my guest." So John shows up, walks up to Sandra and says, "I'd like a ticket, please." And she looks at him. She worked 2 blocks away from his apartment and knew him very well by sight, had never talked to him. And she looked at him and said, aren't you on this list? And John said, "No, I'm not." She said, "Well, aren't you, there's someone important. I think that I have a ticket for you." He said, "No, you don't. Sorry, I'd just like to buy this ticket." And she said, "What's your name?" And he said, "I don't have a name." It wasn't necessary for him to prepare an audience, because if you knew anything about him, especially his books, he wrote many, many books, you would know 2 things. One is that no matter what you expected, something else would happen. And the other thing was that the gift of attentive listening is the greatest gift for humans. So it's not that you were going to go to a concert with the expectation of something that you knew beforehand, but in going to the concert, I think he would hope that you were surprised and perhaps entertained. He was a very sociable person, and he also didn't feel that he was enjoying life unless he was working very hard, and probably wanting to make others work hard around him too, so that they were all engaged in activity together. There is something that runs throughout his work That is the desire to be as precise as possible, and at the same time to escape the predictable. I know that he got impatient with doing things over and over again. Maybe it was his quest for fame. Maybe it was feeling that he needed to be challenged to try to find new ways of working. But he tried a number of very different kinds of compositions, and from the 60s to the end of his life, it's an amazing panorama of different ways of working in music. For the performer, Cage, the difficulty is that, especially in pieces like the etudes for piano, violin, and cello, you are being asked to work very, very, very hard. To read a text and interpret it, realize it, the result of which is sounds completely arbitrary to some people. But it turns out that the concentration, the devotion of the performer, the concentration that they bring to a performance communicates one of the essential qualities of those works, and that is that the composer has tried to set up an idiomatic work that pulls the performer beyond what they have ever had to do before. And in that way, the performers have a chance to develop their technique in idiomatic terms, but beyond what anyone would idiomatically write. His phrase, which I use in almost every situation in which I find myself puzzled or trapped or concerned, is that you're studying it and you're doing your very best. And then, once it happens, it authentically is. And you are beyond worrying about it anymore. You have done your best, and you've given your best shot. And then you have to not only accept, but enjoy the result. So it's always that line of effort and skill, and then there's the moment of truth in which the thing is actually happening, and then suddenly it's like you've broken through a wall, and suddenly it's become the past. Rob Frankenberry and David Russell and I first played together in 1994, and I wrote a piece for us to play with Dale Spiker, a wonderful percussionist, and this was in Akron, Ohio. And we've played, especially David and Rob and I have played continuously ever since then. We're always thinking about each other because most of our experiences in playing new music, most satisfactory experiences, have been in each other's company. It's an imaginative utility for time travel, and that is actually precisely what music is, according to many people, and including John Cage, who's liked the phrase that music was a means of rapid transportation. I took at least 3 words: entelechy or entelechy, tel as in far-seeing television, far-hearing tel-audience, and chronos, the word for time. And that seems to encapsulate not only my relationship to music and life, but also what I feel music is at bottom. It is time plus memory. I feel that every time we get together, we're inhabiting our past and our present at the same time. It's very easy for us to put music together because we understand each other very well and are still surprised.